Good afternoon and welcome everyone. On behalf of the West Coast Collaborative, I welcome you to today's technical webinar on natural gas and propane technologies and infrastructure. This is an important webinar as a part of our Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Corridor Coalition. We have a wonderful presentation prepared for you today, and we look forward to sharing it with you. We are going to give it about 2 minutes to let everybody else register online. We do have a good number of registrants participating in today's call. So around 2:32, we will get started. All right, thank you so much and stand by. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on natural gas and propane technologies and infrastructure. My name is Alicia Gildy. I'm a director at CalSTART, and I am a lucky partner to be working with the West Coast Collaborative on the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Corridor Coalition. And we have a wonderful lineup of presenters today, and I look forward to introducing you to each of them. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we plan to discuss today. So we want to give you a little background on the coalition and what we're seeking to achieve and why we would love to engage your partnership as we look at how we can build out alternative fuel corridors on the West Coast to enable the adoption of clean vehicle technologies for medium and heavy duty vehicles. Then we're going to talk about the technical webinar objectives. What do we want to get out of today's lessons? We have wonderful discussion leaders that have prepared excellent remarks and presentations, and they're going to teach us a lot about the emerging technologies and infrastructure considerations for natural gas and propane vehicle technologies. And then following their wonderful presentations, we are going to have a work group discussion. So first, a little bit about our coalition, the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Corridor Coalition. This is an important partnership that the West Coast Collaborative is spearheading, and I, along with John Mikulin and the EPA Region 9 and Region 10 team, are really looking at an opportunity where we can help convene and bring together partners in California, Oregon, and Washington to improve our coordination and our planning activities to fill in the gap, fill in the infrastructure gap for alternative fuels. And we see this as a really important opportunity to reduce emissions, to provide fuel supply diversity, to really look at opportunities where we can promote sustainable freight, public works, refuse collection, transit, school bus, really looking at medium and heavy duty vehicles across the board, across various vocations and duty cycles. And at the end of the day, we're really hoping that we can help spur the economy, look at how we can drive local job creation and economic development. And what you see here on this slide, if you look on the right here, this is an example of a corridor, the I-5 corridor all the way along the West Coast for EV charging. So we are seeing and we're learning, especially with the Federal Highway Administrations and through the Fixing America's Transportation Act, Section 1413, with a designation of alternative fuel corridors, we have a real important opportunity to advance clean vehicle technologies, to not only promote sustainable and environmental goals, but also to promote economic goals as well. So we have 5 critical objectives that we're looking to achieve here, and where we would really love to engage your partnership in this activity. So first, what we want to do is we really want to convene a stakeholder coalition group really focused on medium and heavy duty alternative fuel infrastructure development. We want to conduct stakeholder work groups and targeted outreach to identify unfunded medium and heavy duty infrastructure project needs. So where are there opportunities that we can locate fueling and charging infrastructure to enable the adoption of medium and heavy duty clean vehicle technology? So through this process of then convening stakeholders and these different working groups, and when I'm speaking about the different working groups, we have one established for California, Oregon, and Washington, and really this whole partnership opportunity to really understand across 3 states, where are there similarities, where are there priorities, how can we help share lessons learned, how can we help address industry barriers. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to take all this good feedback on where there are infrastructure needs, where we see some good project opportunities, and synthesize that information into a report that we would then use to help leverage and plan for any funding that would come available, whether state or federally. We want to be able to help our partners with this plan support the implementation of alternative fuel infrastructure development to really build out our national and our local and our regional alternative fuel corridors. This is just giving you an idea of kind of our thought process and our planning process on how we plan to carry out the stakeholder engagement process, how we plan to collect information and really work with you to understand where do we see needs in the region across the 3 states, where can we prioritize the location of infrastructure to enable clean transportation technologies, especially when we're looking at disadvantaged communities, where can we really take advantage of opportunities to improve air quality, where we have a lot of congestion, where we have a lot of air quality challenges, and really look at where we can apply infrastructure to help vocational fleet needs, where we see a lot of freight activity. So this is a process of which we're bringing together partners who really want to be a part of a regional strategy to promote alternative fuel corridor development. And through this process of working with partners and collecting information, again, pulling together a draft implementation plan, which we do want to make available to everyone who's calling in today and everyone who's a part of our partnership, so that we're building consensus on what does that regional strategy look like and how can we effectively work together to promote the development of alternative fuel corridors. So today, why we have this webinar is to really ensure that at the same time that we're trying to collect feedback from you on where do you see infrastructure needs to help promote the adoption of natural gas and propane technologies, we also want to educate our stakeholders on what are the latest emerging technologies. What are the cost considerations? What's the business case? How do we encourage fleets to evaluate their options depending on operational suitability? Where do we see technologies making the best sense where, depending on that vocation or that duty cycle? What are some important infrastructure considerations? So, we look at the capital cost of investing in new vehicle technology. What are the operational costs? What's it going to take to deploy a clean vehicle fleet? What are the infrastructure needs you're going to need to have in place? We also want to hear from our fleet end users who demonstrate some best practices. They've gone over the hurdles, they've learned through some challenges, but now they can share with us some excellent learnings on how to move forward with the adoption of these technologies in a sustainable way. And then lastly, we want to hear from our partners on what are their opportunities for alternative fuel corridors for natural gas and propane, medium and heavy duty vehicles. We also are going to have a webinar next week, and if you're interested, want to make sure we have this information available to you as well. So if you all are aware of the FAST Act Section 1413 in partnership with the Federal Highway Administration, the reason why we are paying particular attention to natural gas, propane, electric, and hydrogen, that those are the eligible technologies and fuels under the FAST Act. So we really want to emphasize the opportunities for those clean vehicle technologies for our coalition effort. So we've organized 2 webinars. Today's webinar on natural gas and propane, and then next week on Tuesday, we're going to have one focused on plug-in electric and hydrogen fuel cell technologies. So definitely encourage you to register and learn more about these great technologies. So who's going to help aid our conversation today? Well, we have a wonderful lineup of discussion leaders, also friends who have been really a part of the clean transportation community and have really been helping us to really shape that roadmap and understand what it means to make sure that we're getting the right information, that we're getting the right people at the table, making sure that we're turning, over any cover we may not be considering. So we're really happy and grateful to have today's presenters with us. So let me quickly go through our presenters so you know who we have. And again, I just want to acknowledge my partner, John Mikulin, who is an environmental protection specialist with EPA Region 9, and he's really been the visionary of moving this great coalition effort forward, and CalSTAR's very lucky to have these partnership opportunities. So today's presentations are going to be made by Bill Zobel, good friend from Trillium CNG. He's a general manager of business development and marketing. We also have a great case study that Steve Larson from Ruan Transportation Management Systems has provided to our team to share with you today about the use of renewable natural gas. So a really interesting case study there that we're looking forward to sharing with you. We also have Joy Alafia, who is the Executive Director of the Western Propane Gas Association. Joy has a lot of great experience and a wealth of information on really looking at these opportunities in business case for propane. We also have Todd Mao, who is the president of Roush Clean Tech, and they're going to share with us the latest technologies and consideration for deploying propane technologies, and we're excited to have Todd with us as well. We also have Dan Zinger, who is the Equipment Service Superintendent with the City of Vancouver in Washington. Dan is going to share with us his experience of deploying propane technologies within his fleet operation. And then lastly, I want to mention a real wonderful friend, John Gonzalez with NREL. He's a senior engineer of advanced deployment and has a lot of experience in natural gas and propane technologies, and we're going to lean on him for some of his technical expertise today. So thank you, John, for being with us. All right, so with all of that, I would love to toss it over to my friend Bill Zobel with Trillium, which is a love company. Bill, go ahead and take it away, my friend.
Alicia, thank you. Let's just hop into the next slide, please. We'll get right to it. So a little bit about us and who we are. Trillium is the alternative fuels brand for the Love's family of companies. We are an affiliated company with Love's Truck Stops. We provide turnkey solutions for our customers throughout the country, providing design and build services for refueling centers, both the CNG, RNG space, electric and hydrogen refueling. We provide also operations and maintenance services for those same fuel lines, retail public fueling primarily on the CNG side, and renewable natural gas to several of our customers. All encompassing, we operate over 220 refueling centers across the United States on the alternative fuel side. Next slide, please. So Alicia asked me to talk a little bit about CNG trends, kind of what's going on in the marketplace, where things sit. And the timing is really good for this. I'm glad the webinar is when it is. The current CNG economics for commercial fleets are very positive. Things are really looking up with the uptick in crude oil prices. We are seeing retail fuel spreads on the West anywhere between $1.50 and $2. When you translate that all into a fleet of trucks that operate on compressed natural gas, you're seeing savings of anywhere from 5 to 10 cents per mile. We've modeled that out with several fleets that we work with. We've got our own fleet of Gemini trucks. I'll show you a few pictures of those a little bit later that operate well within that range and very efficiently and very reliably. There are incentives in the West up to about $40,000 currently for a Class 8 over-the-road truck. Those incentives are expected to increase to $45,000 in the state of California. I expect in the first quarter of next year. We're waiting for some regulatory things to take place, but those incentives should go up. And at present, California and Colorado are the two states in the West that have the best incentives for natural gas vehicles. Another thing that's helping to support the economics is locking in that value proposition for fleets over a term. So what we've seen is when we have a value proposition of this, say $1.50 or $2 against diesel price, we as a provider and some of our competitors can lock in a spread for you over a term that ensures you have that $1.50 to $2 differential over the term of the contract, despite what prices do on the diesel side, whether they go up or down, you still have that $1.50 value locked in. So there are a lot of financial mechanisms that are coming into play in the market where providers are taking advantage of that and helping folks get into these new vehicles and realize these savings. We're seeing on these new CNG trucks that are going to come on the road are expected to be extremely reliable and run more clean, be the cleanest commercially available trucks in the marketplace. The new 12-liter low NOx engine platform coming out from Cummins Westport, which will be available in the first quarter of next year, is expected to perform at a very high level. The warranties on those trucks are very good, and the maintenance platforms that they have set up for those that do it right should be on par or just a couple cents more than diesel, depending on what you're able to realize. As I mentioned, they are the cleanest commercially available heavy-duty truck on the marketplace, and there's no commercial heavy-duty truck that can outperform these in terms of NOx emissions. These trucks have no diesel particulate filter maintenance associated with them, and they don't use any DEF. Another advantage for some carriers is the 2,000-pound weight exemption that's currently available in 28 states. I've got a map on the next slide. Let's hop to that real quick, Alicia. This next slide shows you where these 28 states are that have the weight exemption in place. Alicia, I'm assuming these decks will be available for everybody after the webinar. So you'll have access to this. This is also on the Natural Gas Vehicles for America website, NGVA website, if you'd like to utilize it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what makes sense? Which fleets make sense to convert over to compressed natural gas today? No, it doesn't make sense for all fleets, but it does make sense for a lot of them. And what we've seen, everything that we've done has been fleets who consume a high volume of fuel are the best candidates for CNG conversion. For the over-the-road trucking side, fleets that run above 85,000 miles a year per truck present a good candidate in the OTR space. Refuse and transit with their duty cycles with a lot of stop-start, return to base style operations that they run also create good opportunities for high fuel consumption and conversion over to compressed natural gas. Fleets that are able to utilize the state level grants that are out there, in particular in California and Colorado, are well positioned to apply those grants to new natural gas trucks and move into the marketplace and realize the savings and cost benefits that we saw 2 slides prior to this one. The good maintenance practices that I touched on earlier, Steve may touch on this as well. I know his fleets have quite a bit of experience with this, but these maintenance practices, when done right, can bring your fleet on par or just a few cents more than the cost per mile for diesel. We've seen this with our Gemini fleet. We've got 50 natural gas trucks that operate today. These are the first generation 12 liters, and we expect even better performance out of this next generation of 12-liter trucks with these maintenance practices. Fleets that also make sense are those that are looking to seek a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So there are several shippers that are still looking for sustainability benefits, where these can be applied with the benefits of renewable natural gas, which I'll touch on here for just a minute, or the emissions benefits associated with the new 12-liter low NOx engine creates an excellent means for you to differentiate yourself from others in the business. Again, the lower cost per mile goes right to your bottom line. That should help fleets move into the fuel. The fuel continues to have low price volatility on the natural gas side, and that provides for low fuel prices and consistency long term. Next slide, please, Alicia. This is a chart that many of you may have already seen if you've been part of other presentations of this nature. You can see this illustrates where the new 12-liter ISLG near zero natural gas engine plays out in terms of emissions and greenhouse gas potential. And your greenhouse gas potential, which is on the horizontal axis, can get even better with the use of renewable natural gas. But just visually, you can see the emissions profile of this new engine is incredibly low, better than anything else on the marketplace or anything we've seen so far. Next slide, please, Alicia. This is a quick look at the engine lineup. They've got 3 ISL natural gas engines. The ISB is the medium-duty engine. ISLG is the 9-liter, primarily used in the refuse and transit space, and then the ISX12, that's the engine that we see in the heavy-duty over-the-road market. All of these engines run on either CNG or LNG, and RNG is a drop-in fuel for any of those engines. This is a slide. That's okay. We can go to the next one. That's fine. This slide is just a pictorial that's used for what we use to show the various qualities of renewable natural gas and how they sort of stack up in carbon intensity. We've used this for some time. It's a bit dated. It's probably about a year or two old. CARB adjusts these numbers every time the moon changes, but from a high level perspective, this gives you some idea of where the base diesel fuel is today, what the biodiesel looks like, fossil natural gas, and then all of the renewable gas sources are over to the right in the green. And you can see that those provide a tremendous carbon benefit relative to either fossil natural gas or diesel itself. So these are the platforms that generate credit in the low carbon fuel standards market in California, and also are applicable in the RIN market, the federal RIN market nationwide. Next slide, please, Alicia. So a little bit about refueling infrastructure. This collaborative obviously is focused on refueling infrastructure and trying to get more of that deployed to make it easy for fleets to move into natural gas. The keys to this, in our minds, are, it's primarily dependent on the operation of the fleet. Some fleets like to fuel behind the gate. Some fleets like to fuel out on the road. It all depends. Some fleets want to fuel more quickly and get their drivers right back out. Other fleets will park for long periods of time, like overnight, and be able to access a time fill operation. So much depends on the characteristics of the fleet and what they're looking for. Based on that, refueling speed could be important. If you're going to use something public access and over the road, you're going to want to make sure that your refueling speed is adequate for your fleet to get your drivers in and out very quickly. System controls are important to that. You want to make sure if you do build a station for yourself or using a station on the road, that stations you are using have good controls and can help minimize energy consumption for you if you build it for yourself. Reliability and preventive maintenance, like anything else with a large investment, is very important. You're going to want to make sure that you have that. 24/7 monitoring can be important for those that want to have access to their system all the time and want to know that it's up and running, and if there is a problem, that somebody is able to respond within a reasonable time frame and maintain that system quickly. Many of the service providers in the country today have these systems available, and I would advise all of you that are considering this to ask us whether these things are available and what it might cost to have that. Service networks are important. You're going to want to make sure that if you do build a station or utilize a station, it's within a reliable service network. And if you build it for yourself, that the utility connections that you're thinking about or have thought about are adequate to support the station that you're looking for. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about station development. This is what we're looking at, use for new CNG development. Commercial corridors, which align very well with this collaborative, will be very important going forward. We're actually involved in several collaboratives across the country that are doing similar things to try and build out heavy-duty natural gas refueling centers across the U.S. and connect these regions with one another through these high-capacity commercial corridors. We use our retail hospitality centers, the Love's Truck Stops, as an anchor for many of these stations. Currently, we have 27 truck stops with compressed natural gas fueling at them. We're putting 2 new ones in California this year, and we've got designs on 4 more. And I suspect that others that have on-highway hospitality will be looking to do the same thing as the market continues to advance. Providers are also building car lock operations for those. Those are not tied to the retail footprint of a retail location. They can be put anywhere that's convenient for a fleet that makes sense and provide a lot of convenience for those that don't necessarily want to utilize highway hospitality centers. What's important here from a policy perspective is as we're building out this kind of infrastructure, incentives matter. There are states that provide incentives for infrastructure and those that don't. And I think what we'll see is a much larger uptick in heavy-duty refueling centers in states like California and Colorado that do provide incentives for infrastructure. So look for more development in those areas. And I put a few websites on here if you are looking for ways to locate CNG stations. Here's a couple of websites that you can use to access not only location, but pricing along some of these as well. Next slide, Alicia. I actually think that's it. One more. A little bit about grants and incentives. So again, these are very important to the economics, commercial economics of the fleet. On the vehicle and infrastructure side, as I mentioned a few times here throughout the course of the presentation, state-level programs in California and Colorado are the most appealing in the West today, and I think will help drive the market here in the very near term. They serve a variety of market segments, in particular the heavy and medium duty on the natural gas side. That's where we see the best utility for this fuel. The environmental aspects or attributes of the engine, the natural gas engine, provide the best air quality benefits, and with the use of renewable natural gas, the carbon reductions of these fleets are unmatched. A little bit on the VW Settlement Fund. Many folks have probably heard about that. Much of that money is going to be directed towards public school systems and municipal government, which we could see a little bit more going to the commercial sector, but it doesn't look like that's the way it's going to shake out. It varies from state to state. Every state's a little bit different, and if you want to look for any details on your particular state, the NGB America website has a nice summary on just about every state in the nation in terms of what they've submitted and what they're doing with those monies if you're interested. And that can be accessed through the link at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. That'll do it. Thank you.
Bill, thank you so much. A wonderful presentation. And guess what, everyone? The presentation is even available as we speak. If you go to your control bar on the right, you can see that in the little handout section, 1 out of 5, there's one handout, and that's today's presentation. So if folks want to download that right now, they can, and can access these great resources that Bill has shared with us. All right, Bill, thank you so much. And if I can ask the team, our panelist team, to mute your phone, only because there's a little bit of background noise. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much, Bill. That was really wonderful. And I might need your help on this next presentation, so stand by, my friend. So I had a really great conversation with Steve Larson with Ruan. He wanted to be with us today and couldn't make it, but did put together some nice slides for me to walk through to educate you a bit about their decision on moving part of their fleet to natural gas, and even sharing some experience of implementing and deploying renewable natural gas. And so he did put together some really nice slides, and I want to share that information with you so that you also can learn something from Steve and his good learnings. And of course, he's also provided his contact information so that if you have questions for him, you can certainly reach out to him, or you can share your questions with me, and I'll make sure that they get answered. All right, so a little bit about Ruan. They were founded in 1932. They're headquartered in Des Moines, Iowa. Their primary business offerings include dedicated contract transportation, supply chain solutions, warehouse management, integrated solutions. They do have a national footprint with about 300 operations. They have approximately 4,000 Class 8 tractors with 9,500 trailers. And they're a big advocate of sustainability. And you can see a list here of various awards that they've received for really trying to go green and provide the best service that they can to their customers. And they realize the important part that they can play in promoting clean transportation. And so even participating in webinars like this, and we tend to lean on Steve often to share his testimonial as a fleet manager of a CNG fleet, and with the use of renewable natural gas to share his good learnings to other fleet end users as they're thinking about their options. So about their compressed natural gas fleet, they have actually run over 90 million miles on CNG equipment to date. At a glance, they have about 120 CNG 12-liter engine tractors in service. Their fleets are operating in Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, Texas, and Wisconsin. And what was the purpose and reasoning of moving toward natural gas? Well, Steve made some generic assumptions about the number of trucks, miles per year, contract terms. So really looking at, what are some important considerations when procuring and operating a natural gas fleet. He made some important assumptions looking at miles per gallon, the price per gallon, that not having to worry about a DEF usage, looking at potential fuel credits, especially with the use of renewable natural gas, like, for example, in California with the low carbon fuel standard. Looking at the equipment cost, are there grants available to help buy down the cost of those clean vehicle technologies? What are some residual considerations that need to be made to help calculate depreciation? Where are their interests and understanding of educating the operators that are going to be operating the vehicles, what training is going to be needed, what are the maintenance costs per mile, and then what are some other state level impacts? So looking at excise and sales tax on purchase, looking at personal property tax, and then the calculation of the total cost of ownership, and just understanding over the life of operating this natural gas fleet, what can you expect in terms of costs, and really making an important decision, realizing that, yes, there is a business case, and making that commitment of transitioning into a natural gas fleet. So with Ruan's experience with, really looking at equipment, and there are a variety of manufacturers, certainly using Cummins, a low NOx natural gas vehicle technology engine is also a great option, but they have really did their homework on what technologies are going to work best for Ruan's operation. Really looked at the vehicle cost, saw that there is a significant upcharge versus diesel, and that's why grants are very important to help buy down the cost. I think the largest factor that they were looking at when they were looking at vehicle costs was the CNG tank selection. Depending on how far and how long you're going to be operating your truck fleet, understanding what tank size you're going to need to have sufficient fuel. One of the important learnings that he shared is not to overspec, but need to be comfortable with the operating range and weight. Depressed resale market led to this decision of refurbish and to run the equipment for a second life. So making some important decisions on continuing the use of that fleet even beyond perhaps what it was expected, that he's still seeing some great benefits there, but also looking at how to further reduce costs. In terms of maintenance lessons learned, so in Ruan's Fair Oaks, Indiana location, their vehicles, which I believe this is also their fleet that's running on renewable natural gas, has had over 1 million life-to-date miles after refurbishment. So this is just a great demonstration of how long and how durable these vehicle technologies have been operating. There are shorter maintenance intervals in terms of oil changes. You did bring up the need of looking at spark plugs. That's not available on HPDI diesel engines. There are tank inspections required for every 36,000 miles. Overall, CNG equipment maintenance is generally expected to be a little higher than diesel from his learning, so approximately 2 cents per mile higher, including inspections costs. All right, so in terms of CNG renewable natural gas station considerations for a fleet, so you need to make sure that the station specs are adequate for fleet operations. They have to be Class 8 accessible for Ruan, so making sure that the location is accessible, controlled intersections, road type conditions, proximity to interstates. This is important as we're talking about developing our alternative fuel corridors, making sure that we have fueling stations closely nearby our transportation corridors for easy access. Having fleet cards accepted, so really making in terms of purchasing the fuel when needed as easy as possible. Having redundant compressors. The fill rates should be around 10 to 14 GGE per minute. This is a card lock versus a full service truck stop in terms of their experience. Customer service phones available for drivers, that's really important. There's the public versus behind the fence option in terms of having access to a public station versus having your own private fueling infrastructure, and just making sure for, depending on the scale of your fleet, having multiple pumps and lanes for easy refueling purposes. All right, so a little bit about their Fair Oaks operation. So the anaerobic digestion, they are counting on 32,000 dairy cows to help them produce the methane for their renewable natural gas. Their operation consists of 140 drivers with 40 tractors and about 85 tankers. They have 333,000 gallons of milk moved daily, 122 million gallons of milk per year. That's a significant volume of milk. Approximately 60 million miles have been driven since 2011. Renewable natural gas fueling displaces about 1.8 million gallons of diesel annually. So that's great success in terms of displacing diesel fuel with a clean, low carbon fuel. The fleet life extended with engine work and cab refinish. So many units in the CNG fleet have well over 1 million life-to-date miles. That's pretty impressive. All right, in terms of special considerations for renewable natural gas projects, so looking at the important renewable natural gas stakeholders and their primary role. So for the natural gas producer, you're really looking at your capital investor, the digester, the local utility, bringing that renewable natural gas from the digester to the pipeline. The shipper, who is willing to sign up for a multi-year transportation commitment. The carrier, who's going to purchase the vehicles and sign up for a multi-year fuel supply agreement. Then there's the fuel retailer and station management. So they're going to be providing, they're going to have the card readers, the site maintenance, the fuel invoicing. Then there's our government agencies who we rely on for their support, providing grants and incentives and supporting with project permitting. Then there's the maintenance provider, the CNG compliance shops, maintenance contracts, and then lastly, our vehicle manufacturer, making sure that we're providing appropriate vehicle specs and pricing. So these were all important considerations for renewable natural gas projects. All right, and here's Steve Larson's email, and of course, if you all have questions, do feel free to share with them with me if there are questions that we can't answer today, and maybe there's some that Bill can help address. But again, I'm happy to reach out to Steve Larson and make sure we get your good questions answered. All right. With that, I would love to introduce Joy Alessia, who is the President and CEO of the Western Propane Gas Association. Joy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Alicia, and thanks for this opportunity. I'm very excited to chat with you and your participants about propane. Propane vehicles have been around for decades, and it's estimated that there are more than 200,000 propane-powered vehicles on America's roads today. But just like everything else, there's been technology advancements, and I'm delighted to share some of that with you, both in the engine development as well as with the fuel. Next slide. So here are some of the OEM certified fuel systems that are available today. These run solely on propane, and you can see there's quite a number of OEM manufacturers available. Next slide. And then outside of California, there are some aftermarket certified fuel systems. These are primarily bi-fuel, or two fuels on board. Propane autogas is a primary engine fuel, and gasoline serves as a secondary fuel. Again, that's outside of California. Next slide. A wide array of vehicles from light to medium duty applications, including trucks, cutaway vehicles, paratransit, box delivery trucks, and school buses. And I just want to take a moment. I think some of the other presenters might talk a little bit too about the school bus market. This morning, approximately 15,600 propane school buses safely transported almost 1 million students to 848 schools in 48 states, and all of these students will be safely transported back home. And I bring this up because propane has been a fuel choice in the school transportation system since 1965, and there are many reasons for this. It's first and foremost is safety, but there are some environmental and economic reasons as well that can translate into any fleet operation who's looking for budget savings as well as clean engines and of course, as I mentioned, vehicle safety. Next slide. And some names you may know, too many to really list on a screen, but you can see a lot of different types of customers have used and continue to use propane for their fleets. One company that I don't have listed up here that I probably should is the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System, or MTS. They had an interesting challenge, and propane provided the solution for them. So they're located in San Diego. So as you can imagine, Southern California has and continues to have a serious air quality issue. And for decades, reducing emissions, including greenhouse gas, NOx, and carbon dioxide, has been one of the really big drivers, if you will, for San Diego's MTS. And until recently, the organization's fixed routes on minibuses and paratransit routes still ran on gasoline. In the fall of 2016, that changed. MTS added 77 propane autogas vehicles to its minibus and paratransit fleets, which reduced both the fuel costs and emissions. So the results for this company was they deployed 77 autogas vehicles and will remove more than 2 million pounds of greenhouse gases produced by its bus fleet each year. And they also found that incorporating propane autogas into its fleets was seamless, it was easy for their operators, less maintenance, and a pretty easy sell for the board of directors. In no small part because of the cost savings. When you look at the fuel differential from conventional fuels, they were able to achieve in their first year operational savings, including the fuel, of $750,000. And so that's money that they can use for other needs within their organization. Next slide. So a couple of quick bullets, and there could be more, but just a few. So it says why autogas, safe technology, reliable performance. We're finding that there are some other alternative fuels that just can't meet the duty cycle that, frankly, propane, natural gas, and a host of others can deliver reliably on. So we're pleased to offer something that is low cost and delivers the performance that customers have come to expect. Affordable infrastructure, that's another big benefit for propane. It doesn't come with a lot of upfront cost, so that is something that clearly fleet owners like. If you're able to install a station or a tank, or even utilize a network of stations available, this is a good option for you. The ease of adoption, again, and the low total cost of ownership. So even when conventional fuel prices are low, propane still saves money because of the repairs, the lack of need for different types of like DPFs and other types of filters that can drain a fleet owner's budget. So over the lifetime, propane autogas is a healthier option for everyone's budget sheet. Next slide. And as I mentioned, it's reliable. Propane autogas performs in the coldest of climates. So if that's of concern, this is really an area where autogas shines. It cranks reliably down to negative 50 degrees, no block heaters or fuel conditioners, fast warm up without lengthy idle periods. And it produces consistent heat throughout the passenger component. So lower maintenance costs are one of the reasons behind propane's popularity for high mileage vehicles. Propane's high octane rating combined with its low carbon and low oil contamination characteristics have resulted in improved engine life compared to conventional gasoline engines. Because the fuel's mixture is propane and air is completely gaseous when entering the engine's combustion chamber, and it doesn't require an enriched fuel mixture for the combustion, such as with many other liquid fuels. Cold starts, therefore, are not a problem. Next slide. So again, this is a little bit of detail here, but recently a new nozzle was introduced. It's the K15 Quick Connect nozzle. It's affectionately known as the Granny nozzle, and it's revolutionizing the propane refueling experience. It's very lightweight, and it has a secure lock bayonet style nozzle that securely locks into place during refueling. And the reason why this is important is it reduces evaporative emissions. So it's also called the granny nozzle because it's very lightweight that even a granny can lift it. So when compared to conventional fuel nozzles, the K15 nozzle, it securely locks, eliminates fuel spills, emissions, and the fuel smell issue. Next slide. Another benefit is the scalable infrastructure, and this again speaks to the low cost. You could start small, and as your fleet grows, propane can grow with you. So you don't have a heavy outlay of cash at the outset, and you could grow as your business grows. In terms of the types of stations, there are a variety of options. So you might want the standard private station is really best for fleets that need central refueling locations. So this would be on your site. The setup includes a 1,000 to 2,000 gallon tank and a single propane autogas fuel dispenser. And I would say this is best for small fleets of 50 vehicles or fewer. And it really provides that central refueling location that's very convenient for those types of fleets. Next slide. If you're a little bit bigger than that, you might want an advanced private station. That's probably a better choice for larger fleets that still want that central refueling location. The setup can include higher capacity fuel storage tanks. So I probably should have had a few larger tanks here in addition to easily adding dispenser stations as well. And so this is a station that might include a canopy and multiple propane autogas fuel dispensers. The same pump can motor and handle a 1,000 gallon tank or up to 6 tanks, all without changing electrical or site requirements. And then for those who are looking for not to house the fueling station on site, the option for you is the best option would be a private or public network. So you could tap into the network of fueling stations throughout the country, and typically you would use a card to access the fuel, and the fuel is available 24/7 through the card lock system. Next slide. Just like to point out the benefit of propane in terms of emissions. It's non-toxic and non-contaminant of air, soil, and water resources. So that's really important for those that have sustainability or clean air initiatives. Continuing on that theme, next slide, it really gets down to what's important for your company. Ultimately, there are many reasons why fleets decide to take action and make the switch to propane for their vehicles. The key benefit is different for each customer. So for some, it's solely about the economics. How can I reduce my operating costs? How much can I save on fuel and labor? And for others, it may be a push to enact environmentally friendly practices into your business operation. Propane allows you to do both. Next slide. And as our industry looks to the future, we are keenly focused on how we can continue to provide benefit both from an environmental standpoint and a cost standpoint. So later in this webinar, you're going to hear from Roush, who's deployed an ultra low NOx 0.02 6.8 liter engine, which is 90% cleaner than the EPA standard. Greencraft also has a 0.02 low NOx engine available, and that's for the 8 liter V8 fuel injected engine. And these achievements demonstrate propane manufacturers' continued commitment to clean air quality initiatives by providing these near zero emission engines. So we have a host of vehicles available for consumers, class 4 to class 8, with the low NOx requirement. That not the requirement, meet the ultra low NOx goal here, if you will. Looking towards the future as well, we're not only advancing our engine technology, but finding ways to reduce the carbon footprint of our fuel. So next slide, please. Renewable propane is on the horizon. We expect to see renewable propane on the West Coast in the first quarter of 2019. Renewable propane is currently being produced in commercial volume in Europe, and we anticipate that with the inclusion of propane and the low carbon fuel standard here in California, that will help to incentivize the production of renewable propane and the West Coast as well. So renewable propane comes from a variety of sources, basically those sources, feedstocks with carbon. In this case, it could be made from beef tallow, corn oil, or soy oil, or even use cooking oil. And it's a byproduct of the renewable diesel process. It's a hydrotreating process of these molecules that ultimately yields renewable propane. And just as with other renewable fuels, the benefit is twofold. It's sustainable, and it also introduces a low carbon intensity value. So when you're looking at the carbon footprint, you're looking at approximately high 70s for conventional propane. But for renewable propane, we're talking 30 grams of CO2 emissions per megajoule when renewable propane is derived from natural gas, hydrotreated processes, or as low as 24.7 grams of CO2 emissions per megajoule for renewable propane derived from biomass. Next slide. And so in conclusion, this is just demonstrating the vegetable oil component as well. Next slide. So I just, in conclusion, would like to invite folks to visit www.propane.com. A whole host of information is available there, including a calculator where you can input your specifics, your fuel needs, and compare how propane differs and the advantage that you can achieve changing over to propane. It also includes some other information, including incentive programs available throughout the states and throughout various states, including California, Oregon, Hawaii, and Washington. And you'll also find links to Volkswagen settlements for your respective states. Nothing available in California, but there may be some opportunities in other states. Finally, one other website on the screen, and this is for California incentive. If you click on usecaliforniapropane.com, you can get more information about California rebates. And I'd be remiss for those in California, there is funding available for ultra low NOx engines, those .02 engines, up to $100,000 for vehicles in the San Joaquin area. And feel free to contact me for more information. Thank you for the opportunity again, and the next slide shows my contact information.
Joy, that was excellent. Thank you so much, and what a thoughtful and wonderful overview, and thank you for sharing with us examples of different vocational benefits, sharing with us some information about the low NOx cleaner engines, and looking forward to hearing from Todd a little bit more on Roush's technologies, and then of course talking about renewable propane and the opportunities we can hopefully see soon in the United States. It sounds like there's been some good success in Europe, so thank you so much for your thoughtful presentation. I also just wanted to quickly mention to everyone on the call, I do see some questions coming in. We're going to go through the presentations, and then following the presentations, we're going to take Q&A. So don't you worry, we'll make sure your good questions are answered. All right, Joy, thank you so much. All right, next I would love to introduce Todd Mao, who is the president of Roush Clean Tech. All right, Ted, we're ready for you, Todd.
Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone dialing in here late in the day and learning more about what we're doing with propane autogas. Heard a great overview from Joy on the fuel and infrastructure side, and we'll focus more on the technology side of where our engines and what platforms and what vehicles those are going into. So click for next slide, please. So a little bit about Roush. For those who are not familiar, we're a 42-year-old company that's Michigan-based. If you're into NASCAR racing or hot rod Mustangs, that's typically where people know our brand. But we've been supplying engineering services, prototyping, calibration work, testing, integration for the OEM since the mid-1970s. So typically, people don't hear about Roush Industries, which is the top box here on the slide. That's really the technical arm that gives our world order. Roush Fenway Racing, and then Roush Performance and Roush Clean Tech. And ultimately, Roush Clean Tech leverages that capability within Roush Industries to develop a product, and that starts from the back of a napkin sketch of what that product is all the way through sales, service, and support after the sale for our customers and partners. Click, please. So Roush has a long history, and as I poll some of the folks around here that have been here for multiple decades, we've been involved in alternative fuel vehicle development for the OEMs since the late 70s, early 80s. And from our perspective, we're really fuel and technology agnostic. When we first met the propane industry back in the mid-2000s, it was 2005, they approached us about developing technology would run on propane to consume the abundance of fuel that's now available in the market that Joy somewhat alluded to in her previous presentation. So we looked at all the different technologies and said, you know, we've got experience in natural gas, in hydrogen, electric technology, but the one technology and fuel we really felt was underserved was propane. So the propane industry, they reached out to us. We did a little bit more of a deep dive from a technical perspective. And what we've learned over the last decade is really what's summarized here on the slide. And again, we believe there's a fuel and a technology for all different applications, but because we saw propane underserved and we're a technical company, we saw the benefits of propane that really weren't being called out in the marketplace. So we did a comparison of the traditional fuels, diesel and gasoline, to kind of some of the newer fuels that are out there, that's propane, natural gas, and electric. And we looked at the different categories from ease of adoption to energy independence to NOx reductions, fuel infrastructure, total cost of ownership, range, maintenance, scalability, cold weather operation. And for us, again, from a technical approach, propane checked the box in all of those opportunities. And from our perspective, as we looked at designing, developing, manufacturing fuel system technology, we saw a real sweet spot for propane in the class 4 through 7 vehicle segment. Click for next slide, please. So Joy alluded to it, and obviously we'll talk more about other applications, but one thing we're really proud of, and I think this really is a testament to the scalability and the safety and the cost savings of propane, is that Roush has been partnered with Blue Bird since 2012. We take Ford's engine from their Windsor engine plant, we dress it, made it with a Ford transmission, apply our fuel system technology to it, and Blue Bird integrates it into their plant down in Fort Valley, Georgia. But since 2012, we've deployed more than 13,000 school buses in 49 states and Canada. So in some cases, people ask, am I going to be the guinea pig in this? Are there other users? And the answer is, just on the school bus side, 850 districts, 49 states, and Canada are now using this technology to, as Joy mentioned, transport more than 1 million kids to and from school safely every day. And I think the reason why, again, from a safety perspective, it answers the bell if we're carrying that many kids to and from school safely, that gives people peace of mind. I think brands such as Roush, Ford, and Blue Bird behind this product also gives people the feeling of credibility around the viability of this product. But ultimately, when you talk about sustainability, and we look at it two ways, it's economic and environmental. And from a propane perspective for student transportation, it rings the bell, and the results that you see here in the slide are a testament to that. Click, please. So beyond that, Roush, as I mentioned, we've been very connected with Ford since the mid-70s. Ford has what they call a QVM program. So developing and producing and manufacturing these trucks within their own plants on the current volumes just is not efficient for Ford. So they prep the engines with hardened valves and seats to account for the lower lubricity of propane and natural gas. And then they have preferred partners in their QVM, Qualified Vehicle Modifier program, that they allow to go in and modify the calibration and upfit these vehicles to run efficiently on the fuel of choice. In this case, it's propane autogas. So what that means to the end user is that Ford stands behind the warranty of the base vehicle, and companies such as Roush take over the warranty for the components that we modify. So we really focus, when we first started, we were looking at light duty, but really the sweet spot, and that was driven by our customers, is I need to get away from diesel because of the cost and complexity of that, where my expense is, and that really primarily for us was in the class 4 through 7 segment. So that's where we're focused today. I referenced the Ford factory warranty is maintained. We calibrate the Ford software, the Ford PCM, to maintain the same horsepower, torque, and towing capacity equivalent base gasoline engine. If anything, we're derating that engine a little bit because, as Joy mentioned, there's 105 octane in this fuel. So if we wanted to make this a rocket ship, we probably could. Obviously, our fleet users are looking for total cost of ownership but not horsepower. So, but that, again, just gives you the comfort level that the performance is there. The beauty of working with companies such as Roush that have that QVM designation is that this technology is serviceable with existing diagnostic equipment. Obviously, our technicians will come in and train your technicians to understand how our fuel system integrates in the vehicle, how to troubleshoot, how to replace parts and repair parts, do preventative maintenance. But again, I'm not asking you to invest in an expensive suite of tools to do service on these vehicles. And then everything we do is EPA and CARB certified, so it's sellable in all 50 states, which is important to our national fleet users that want to deploy this technology and make the most of emissions and cost savings reductions. As Joy alluded to, you see the slide there that says 0.02 NOx. We're very proud of that. We have the cleanest engine from a NOx perspective in class 4 through 7, and ultimately at a very low upcharge. So today our customers can either order a 0.05 option at no upcharge, or if they want to go to the 0.02 option, that's about a $4,000 premium. We basically have changed the precious metals within the Ford catalyst and modified the calibration to meet this optional level within CARB. Click for next slide, please. So lowest NOx offering, I referenced that. So this is more of a tie-in to what's going on with the VW funding that has been alluded to and from multiple presenters. And again, we love electric, and the diesel engine's not going away, but when you look at the greatest bang per dollar spent from a NOx reduction perspective, this is look at school bus applications. Propane knocks it out of the park compared to diesel, which is the incumbent fuel, and then electric, which we hear a lot about, is an upcoming technology within a various different duty cycles. But again, cost per pound of NOx reduced, $91 compared to about $1,300 for diesel and about $268 for electric. So the dollars go the furthest from a NOx reduction perspective. Click for next slide, please. So my contact information is at the bottom of the slide, but I wanted to mention next week, the proof's in the pudding. We're doing a California roadshow. Joy and her team will be a part of that as well. We're starting in Sacramento on November 6th, Fresno November 7th, and LA on November 8th. We're inviting all policymakers, fleets, interested customers, partners to come learn more about why this technology makes sense for your fleet from an environmental and economic standpoint. We also will have multiple vehicles on display for ride and drive, and then also we are loaning those vehicles to interested fleets. So if you want to put it through your pace, put it through its paces, let your technicians look at it, get a feel for how easily propane integrates into your fleet. We'll have the trucks there for you to get that see and feel and touch during the event as well as post the event. So we look forward to being a part of that. Appreciate the audience today, and Alicia, look forward to more questions towards the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Todd. This is so exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your roadshow, and certainly when we get to Q&A, we'd love to learn how we can kind of track your activities there. I'm wondering if you're gonna have some social media activities, but anyway, I'm really excited about this and happy to see you guys carrying out this roadshow. Todd, thank you so much for being with us today, and absolutely look forward to more discussion following our next presentation. All right, next up we have Dan Zinger, who is the Equipment Service Superintendent with the City of Vancouver, Washington. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your case study with us as someone who has deployed propane vehicle technologies in your fleet. Take it away.
Thank you everyone for attending. And as indicated, I'm going to share with the group today the experience that I've had with introducing alternative fuels, and especially propane autogas into a city fleet. I do want to back up and pause just a little bit, though. This project that we're going to talk about actually started back in July of 2015 when I was a fleet manager with another municipality, and as of March of this year, I took the position here with the City of Vancouver. So what my experience that I'm going to share with you tomorrow, actually, I have some powers to be to actually show the same presentation and start down this path with the City of Vancouver. So some of you, let's go to the next slide, please. So some of you probably in the audience are asking yourselves which form of alternative fuel options I should use or what would fit my fleet. So as I sat in the same chairs attending, listening into webinars, fleet conferences, fleet meetings, various venues over the course of the years, I wasn't sure which one fits my fleet, which one of these or multiple of ones would be best for our city fleet. So I narrowed it down to these four alternative fuels: ethanol, propane autogas, biodiesel, renewable diesel. So as I mentioned, this kind of started formulating back in July of 2015. And the reason for that is that the city I worked for at that point also maintained and operated transit buses. So as you heard earlier in some slides that their propane autogas is a good fit for transit fleets. The federal government at that point with funding-wise basically came down and said, thou shalt start using alternative fuel as of July of 2015. So the first thing that I did was, because our fleet wasn't ready for that yet, and most of them were diesel, is I introduced biodiesel. I dropped a B5 blend in, and we started using biodiesel. The second thing I did is I introduced the ethanol blended unleaded fuel. So all of our city fleet, as well as the city transit, were running on either ethanol blend or a biodiesel. A couple of years later, in early 2017, is when I was introduced to renewable diesel, which had positive results with regen. So some of you may have fleets that have vehicles that have the new emissions, may understand the regen issues, and renewable diesel helped reduce that, which also reduced some maintenance cost on top of that. So next slide, please. So let's talk about propane autogas, because this is one that I really focused in on and felt like that the municipalities, at least for the city that I was with, could really get in and benefit from. As indicated, it meets all the federal motor vehicle standards. Fuel tanks are 20 times more puncture resistant than gasoline and diesel tanks. And if you really realized what kind of a firebomb we drive around with unleaded tanks in our vehicles currently, it's amazing. And if I had more time, and there's a YouTube video out there that actually shows the law enforcement going to a gun range, and they have various propane tanks out there, and they're shooting these tanks up. And what this shows is one, just this: these are puncture resistant. They can take a beating, and they're not going to blow up like you see on TV. The fuels are stored in relatively low pressure, around 250 psi, and they're very safe to operate. Next slide. So I want to get into the nitty gritty here. I'd like to show you an ROI that we actually took on I think it's an F-250 service truck, and the next slide will show that. But I want to point out that our life cycle we're talking about is 12 years. We had to take the Ford gaseous prep package, which is $350, which requires hardened valves to use the EPA biofuel conversion kit, which we ended up going out to bid, and ICOM ended up being the a vendor that we awarded to, and their average price for conversion kits was around $9,000. This also projected, by going down this path, a projection of 20% reduction in maintenance cost, is expected, and by using propane autogas compared to gasoline. So next slide, please. So thanks to Todd, I found this Roush calculator on his website, and I took out the information that was there and inputted our actual information on this F-250 with service body. Most municipalities, most fleets have those just driving around. So our base price here at $27,000, then you add in your $350 for the gaseous prep package, $8,000 for the conversion kit, gives you an overall cost, which is going to be about $8,000 higher than the normal cost of that unit. We're going to project that our life miles on this in that 12 years, about 130,000 miles. Now, here's the other part of using propane is you will lose about a mile and a half of miles per gallon. But then as you see this, evolve down, you see the savings start coming to par here. So let's go down to the total fuel savings and cost here of $22,000 versus $44,000. That's a $22,000 savings just right there in using fuel. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is the fuel price up there. we were using $3 a gallon of unleaded at the time. Our fuel for auto gas was $1.15. Okay, so there's where you see the big difference there. And then down there for your maintenance cost, and then the total overall cost are, $35,000 for the gross and $26,000 for the net lifetime lease. So you can see real quickly how the return on investment really starts paying off. There is another portion of this calculator that is not on the slide. It actually shows you the emissions reduction that is not here. But anyway, next slide. So what we found is fuel consumed was 83 gallons of auto gas since April, replacing the 58 gallons of unleaded. Average auto gas at that time was $1.31. The average unleaded fuel was $3.27. So you see real quickly how auto gas can be a winner here, with the savings of about $8,100 in the last 6 months of this little project. Next slide. So in conclusion, our ROI is the best, maximum fuel range. One of the things that I want to also point out that our operators, when we did our first conversion, noticed how much more horsepower they actually had, and that when they were hooking on to a trailer with, say, a little Bobcat on it when they were going up hills, they were impressed with how much power they felt they had in auto gas versus the unleaded. So the infrastructure is reasonably priced and can be found almost anywhere. And that's a true statement, because anywhere, any fuel station that has a propane tank, you can fuel your vehicles. So for example, when Katrina hit back in the day, remember we all heard about Katrina, there was a number of issues that presented in that hurricane, and one was that vehicles weren't able to get in and out. A lot of it was because of damage to fuel stations, vehicles just couldn't get fueled up. But the ones that were coming and going in and out of that were the biofuel or propane units, because they could go anywhere that there was a propane tank and fuel up and get going. So the other thing about the ICOM is it is an EPA certified system available to the widest of all the alternative fuels, and cradle to grave emissions are among the best. So next slide. So in conclusion, based on what I just shared with the group, that is why we began introducing propane auto gas. And some of you are going to be in that question of, which one still. There really is not a one-hit wonder. I think your fleets are going to be made up of a number of alternative fuels. You're going to be using some R99 diesel or biodiesel or CNG or auto gas. At least from my experience with 30 years of working with municipalities, there's not just one. Now, unless you're with a transit system, I can see CNG, and I've got good friends that are fleet managers that run transit operating systems, and they have a full CNG blown system. School buses, as we just indicated, prime example of a fleet that ought to be running propane versus diesel, just because of the cost, number one, and then some health benefits that they find when, with the kids with asthma, different things like that. So anyway, if you have any questions, and please feel free to reach out to me, and thank you for the opportunity.
Dan, thank you so much for sharing your history of deploying a propane fleet and all your excellent learnings there, and sharing that information with us. Really helpful, and good luck at your future endeavors with the city of Vancouver, and they're very lucky to have your expertise in deploying alternative fuel vehicle technologies. So thank you so much, Dan, for being on our call today. Well, team, I want to thank all of our presenters. You guys, your presentations were wonderful and extremely thoughtful, and we're definitely lucky to have you. I now want to provide some time for us to have a good Q&A, and I've been seeing some good questions coming in, and I see some hands being raised, so I'm excited to start off our discussion. Before that, I do want to, again, acknowledge that we have our friend from NREL, John Gonzalez, with us as well. So, John, I don't know if you wanted to share any thoughts to today's presentations, any additional value that you would like to bring to the conversation before we take our first question? You might be on mute. All right, John, maybe we'll ping you later, my friend. All right, so let me go ahead and, if you don't mind, everyone, I'm going to first encourage you all, if you would like to speak up, to raise your hand, and I will then unmute you so that you can ask your question. First, let me see, we have a question here from a good friend of mine, Dave Park. What is the process for certifying a new retail CNG station, and who is the certifying agency? Maybe Bill, can you take that question?
Felicia, can you please repeat the question?
Sure. The question is, what is the process for certifying a new retail CNG station, and who is the certifying agency?
Generally, it's the AHJ, the agency with local jurisdiction. We work through the fire department. We'll work through the city permitting agencies to try and get one of these put in the ground. We'll work with the utilities to ensure we've got the adequate utility services available and utility connections brought to the site. And at that point, it's ensuring that we bring the system up online. We have the adequate city inspectors on site. We get things started up and commissioned, and off we go. It's a fairly simple process for those that have done it like us several times and others in the industry. We've got a really good track record of bringing these things online with very little issues.
Great, thank you, Bill. All right, our next question we have, compare the resale value of propane school buses compared to a diesel school bus, and give us a sense of the longevity of these propane buses compared to diesel. I'm wondering if maybe Joy or Todd would like to take that question.
Sure. Yeah, this is Todd. In the school bus world, our technology really has been since 2011, 2012. So I don't know that we have a ton of data on resale of a school bus that runs on propane versus diesel. Most of our fleets are looking at running these vehicles till basically they run them into the ground. So the question that typically we get from a transportation director or a head of maintenance for a school district is, what will this engine look like compared to diesel from a longevity perspective? And so the base Ford engine, Ford tests to 250,000 miles. Obviously, all the calibration and engineering and integration work we do should show that engine on propane should last just as long as the base gasoline variant. So based on the average duty cycle of about 12 to 15,000 miles a year, we see no issue with these propane engines running for the life of these school buses. Some of the questions we are getting, could they even run them longer? Are there other benefits from reduced oil change intervals and things like that? Typically, because it's a real harsh start-stop duty cycle, we recommend sticking with the OEM recommendations for maintenance. But ultimately, the savings are so significant that even if there's a little bit less resale on the back end, which we don't have that data yet, if you're saving $30,000 to $40,000 per school bus over the life of that bus, it more than pays for any risk on the backside.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Really appreciate that. All right, I'm going to unmute Ernie Jones. Did you have a question for us? Let's see if I can unmute you here. All right, Ernie, if you want to enter your question into the question box, perhaps we can answer your question there. Again, folks, if you would like to be heard with your question, just raise your hand so you can tap the little icon, the little hand icon, and I will go ahead and unmute you, or you can put a question in the question box and I will address your question that way. All right, let me follow down here. I see Sean Edgar. All right, Sean, go ahead with your question, my friend.
Hi, Alicia, and hi, team. Great conversation here. Just a couple of questions to focus. I'm the director of Clean Fleets here in Sacramento, and so I've worked on alternative fuel projects for many years. And the group that we work with, we have groups in different industry segments that roll about 3,000 natural gas vehicles every week in California. And so it's great to have the dialogue. I guess my specific question would be relating to what possible federal resources may come of this effort. And I say that because just in my observations in the last week or so, California is going in the wrong direction on the vehicle part. I thought Bill did a good job of characterizing the infrastructure side of it and identifying refuse and transit as key segments to be able to deploy because of the central fueling and high vehicle consumption, and the technology's gotten much better over almost 20 years I've been doing this on the engine technology. So, however, I go back to the years of federal tax incentives that allowed fleet owners to claim under energy bill would be able to claim a federal tax credit. And so my question would be, what thought, if any, of federal tax credits may come about? Because just in the last week, what we've seen is the AFICC program managed by CalSTART has now effectively put refuse and transit in the penalty box as it relates to use of the 8.9 liter near zero emission engine. The 12 liter engine is still available, but for many vocational truck segments, the 9 liter engine is what they choose to use, and until further notice, the incentive through the AFICC program won't be allowed. We have several other programs here in California. San Joaquin Valley, as an example, just released a new truck replacement program where natural gas engine, the low NOx engine, is specifically named. However, like many of the state bond programs, like Proposition 1B, it's tied to goods movement. And so, buses, unless they're human trafficking, no pun intended, buses are not transporting goods. Refuse is not technically considered a good under the goods movement. So we have some local incentives and state incentives that refuse and transit are specifically prohibited from applying for. So with that as kind of the backdrop, and just seeing once again the NGVIP program administered by UC Irvine does not appear that it's going to have any sustainable funding. So having said all that, and having said that for refuse and transit, I think California incentives are going in the wrong direction, including some of the local programs like San Joaquin. What hope, if any, would fleet owners in California, Oregon, or Washington have for any federal tax credit forthcoming? Because it's not very likely that we're going to see a lot here in California.
Sean, thank you so much for your comment. And representing the CalSTART team, I can tell you this much. So CARB made that rule change last week at the board meeting. What CARB is going to initiate in early December is a industry working group to work with partners on evaluating the industry barriers and looking at potential solutions to help advance the market for natural gas vehicle technologies and various other clean vehicle technologies eligible through the HVIP program. So I think if I can encourage your participation in that industry working group, I think that would be really important to hear your feedback when we kick off that activity in early December.
And Sean, this is John Mickelin at EPA. I would just want to add to that. I can't really speak to pending excise tax incentives or congressional action therein, but what I can say is that there are existing programs administered by us at EPA and also by US DOT that do provide subsidies for deployment of natural gas and propane vehicles. For my part, I work on our Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant program. Propane and natural gas vehicles are eligible for replacement of diesel technology, either through conversion, repower, or full equipment replacement projects. Under our rebate program, which is currently open for the school bus sector, those would also be eligible activities, up to $20,000 in federal subsidy per selected bus. And you can stack those with any available state or local incentives. So you can cobble together a variety of different funding assistance packages to help buy down the cost of deploying propane or natural gas vehicles in the school bus sector, partnering with EPA on our rebate program. And then for DOT, there's a variety of different programs that are nationally competitive that could be applied to try to seek additional funding from US DOT. And then obviously from each of the regional MPOs or the state DOTs, they have discretion over what type of alternative fuel vehicle projects they choose to fund using CMAQ and other formulaic allocations from US DOT, and they provide up to an 80% cost share from DOT funding sources. So there are definitely federal resources out there, and they are generally stackable with any state or local public incentives that are available. And then obviously private financing, whether it be with the usury fee or with some amortization schedule, can be combined with a block grant from any public agency. So I hope that helps to answer at least part of your question.
Great, thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. We do have a question from, another question from Eric Seeley. Why are there limitations on propane for Class 8 vehicles? What is the barrier there? Maybe Joy or Todd can take that question for us.
Sure, this is Todd. I guess, Joy, you can provide color commentary if you want. Today we're tied in with Ford on the engine side, and so the largest engine they have really is limited to Class 7. So could the technology port to Class 8 if we had an engine with the right horsepower and torque? Answer is absolutely yes. The beauty of propane is it's liquid, it's portable, so we could pack a lot of fuel on board. We've heard about performance from a horsepower perspective. So it's just been a segment that we really haven't had an engine with the right displacement to attack that market. Hence why we're focused on Class 4 through 7 from the Roush side. Joy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, not too much. I think sometimes we find that we're kind of the forgotten stepchild in the propane industry. So when we see instances where there's funding available and for whatever reason propane is not included, oftentimes we're able to call, and if there's funding available for similar types of alternative fuels, in some instances we're able to get an opportunity there. And in some instances, it may unfortunately be intentional, so we kind of tackle it from an association perspective on a case-by-case basis.
Great, thank you, Todd and Joy. Very helpful. All right, team, I'm looking at our clock, and we have about 3 minutes. I also wanted just to acknowledge that we have Todd Campbell from Clean Energy and my friend Jeff Hovey from the National Association from Truck Stop Operators. Thank you, friends, for also being on today's call. John, maybe in the next couple minutes, did you want to share any thoughts or perspectives to today's presentation before we conclude? And this could be John Gonzalez or John Dillon.
This is John Gonzalez. Lisa, I'm sorry. My mute is right next to my headset, and I went to hit the mute button, and I disconnected. So I did want to talk a little bit about a funding opportunity announcement that is on the street right now. It is for natural gas through the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and CEC. It's intended to award up to $11 million towards projects that advance the state of the current technology in natural gas vehicles. And this research really will focus on several different items. One is reducing the cost premium of MGVs. Two is improving the vehicle efficiency while maintaining low emissions. A third item would be advancing new innovative medium and heavy duty natural gas engines. And this is all focused around total cost of ownership. So I know there are not the incentives that people are looking for out there, but from a Department of Energy standpoint, they are trying to work on bringing the cost of the technologies down so the incentives aren't needed as much as they have been in the past. So this is a current funding opportunity announcement that does close on Monday. It's been out there for a month. It's on natural gas, but I think this is something that the Department of Energy continues to look at for both natural gas and also considering propane in the future. So just want to let everybody know, programs like this is what helped develop the 8.9 liter, helped develop the 12 liter, and some other programs that have been on the books that are out there. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
John, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that wonderful funding opportunity for natural gas vehicles. That's excellent, and no worries. The mute can always be a tricky little bugger sometimes. Well, thank you so much, you all. I really appreciate all the good questions that have come in. And if you feel that you haven't had an opportunity to ask your question, you're very eager, I want to make sure that you can reach out to John McEwen and myself. And Casey on our team will make sure that we get your your questions answered. We also do have the PowerPoint presentation. I want to give you another minute to be able to download that if you're interested. It is on the toolbar. Just go ahead and download that document right now. Again, a nice reminder that we have a webinar coming up next week, Tuesday, on electric and hydrogen technologies and infrastructure. So before we wrap up, John McEwen, my partner, any final words from you before we close today?
Just wanted to extend my thanks again to everyone who has been able to participate today, both our featured presenters and discussants, as well as everyone who listened in, and particularly those who were able to chime in with questions. Really, this session was intended to help build a shared baseline of understanding regarding the availability of propane and natural gas technologies in the medium and heavy duty sector, so that we can all begin to understand where the opportunities might lie for additional infrastructure development. And just moving forward with this Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Corridor Coalition project under the collaborative, just keep in mind that what we're really looking for here is identification of specific project development opportunities for natural gas, propane, plug-in electric, and hydrogen fuel cell electric infrastructure to help eliminate one of the critical barriers to fleets adopting this technology when and where they're interested in doing so. So as Alicia indicated, here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. We will have a couple more open webinar sessions coming up. The one on Tuesday, November 6th on plug-in electric and hydrogen, and then 2 more in December. So please keep an eye out via the West Coast Collaborative listserv for additional announcements about those. And feel free again to reach out ad hoc to Alicia and myself with specific questions, or if you have thoughts or guidance on how we can best administer this project on behalf of the West Coast Collaborative, with the goal of developing a multi-state plan for medium and heavy duty infrastructure project development opportunities, please do let us know. We really want this to work for our partners and to ensure that our colleagues at the state and local level are seeing this as a worthwhile endeavor to complement their goals for sustainable transportation and for diesel emission reduction. So thank you again for your time and attention, and look forward to working with you all further in the near future.
Wonderful. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, John. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants. We look forward to working with you on this important endeavor. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, and we will be talking to you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day.